Good afternoon. First Vice President of the European Parliament, Madame McGuinness, Hungarian Minister of Justice, Madame Varga, Minister President of Flandria, Mr. Jan Jambon, Chief Rabbi of Israel, Israel Lau, Chairman of Yad Vashem, Mr. Marek Halter, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 10 years ago, a group of teachers came to visit Yad Vashem. They were guided by Chief Rabbi Lau, who is here with us. And Rabbi Lau shared with them a story which I would like to share with you today. In Ghetto Warsaw, very loved rabbi lived. He was there with his little daughter. He had many students who appreciate him very much. Unfortunately, the rabbi was murdered in the ghetto. His daughter was able to escape, but she decided that she did not want to have any contact with any Jewish people. She moved to Belgium. She got married with a Catholic person, and she educated her only one son to become a good Catholic. But one of the students of the rabbi was also able to escape to Israel, missed very much his rabbi, and he wanted to get in contact with his daughter. He found her phone number, he called her, and he told her, "I'm a student of your father, I would like to talk to you." And she responded, "I do not want any contact with any Jews." He kept calling several times, and she continued hang up the phone on him. He did not give up. He flew to Belgium. He arrived to her apartment. He knocked on the door. When she opened the door, she said, "I do not want to see any Jew." But he insisted. And he says, "No problem, I will not talk to you. But can you please have a cup of tea? I just came from Israel." A nice person, she let him in and she gave him a cup of tea. And then he said, "I do not want to speak with you anything about Judaism. I'm not here to convince you anything. Could you just tell me what were the last moments of your father?" And she said, "I was there. He was in the ghetto. And at one moment he was praying with his talit and tefillin. And Nazi soldiers came to the house. They started to brutally beat him and laughing at him. "Let's see how your God will be able to help you." They continued to brutally beat him until he died. And she says, "That was the last minutes of my father." The guy finished his cup of tea and he started his way outside. Not before he was telling the daughter, "The key is by you. The key is by you." And he left. He left to his car, waiting a few minutes just to see the daughter running after his car, knocking on the window of the car and asking, "What do you mean the key is by me? What do you mean? Tell me." And he goes and he said, "You see, your father had a plan. Your father wanted Jewish people to continue to be Jewish. Hitler had another plan. He did not want to see Jews in the world. Your father wanted that despite the issues, despite the challenges, Jews have to do extra efforts in order to bring more light to the world. And now it goes, the key is by you. You will decide which plan will prevail. Will it be Hitler's plan or your father's plan?" The daughter listened to him and said, "Let's go right now to the school where my son is studying. I want you please to take him with you to Israel." The child in Israel became a very great rabbi and teacher and educated thousands of people in the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, I'm telling you this story today because the key right now is right here. The key is in your hands. The key is in our hands. This is you asked to decide which plan will prevail. Will it be Hitler's plan, who did not want to see Jews continue spreading good and positive in the world, or would it be our plan that we would like to see Jews continue to contribute for better Europe and for the better world. Let's do all what we can in order to ensure that a good and a positive plan will prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We would like to ask the European Parliament First Vice President, Mrs. McGuinness, to come and greet us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished guests, dear ministers, secretaries of state, dear members of the European Parliament, national and regional parliaments, dear rabbis. Sometimes we are silent because words fail us. And I feel that on this occasion, and I hope you understand. But this journey for me to Auschwitz began many, many years ago. My parents, Irish farmers, came here. And when they came back home, they found it very difficult to speak of what they saw and how they felt for the victims that were murdered brutally here. They described very visually the shoes, the human hair, the horror inflicted by human beings on other human beings, on small children, the absolute innocence in the world. And they asked us to come and visit. And I'm happy that they are gone to their reward, but that I am here. And I thank you for the opportunity, not just obviously from my side on the European Parliament, but for me personally and for my family. I also started reading Primo Levi's book, If This Is a Man. And I've read it because I wanted to be prepared when I came here. And I want to thank all of those who guided us, because our guide was particularly wonderful about describing and giving us time to absorb what we were seeing here. But nothing can quite replace what you read and what you hear with being physically present and understanding, in a way, the horror and trying to imagine the feelings of those whose lives were wiped out in the most cruel way. And you know, Shakespeare used the words, I am bitter, cold, and sick of heart, in a very different context. But I know we are all cold here today. But I'm glad we're cold. I'm glad we are feeling some small discomfort. Because my God, how, when I went into that quarter where the women were kept and tried to feel how they would have felt in that cold, knowing that there was nothing for them. They had no future and they had no hope. I am glad that we are a little cold here on this afternoon, because we know in those days it was much colder. Let me move on perhaps to where we are today, because the reason we gather, dear Rabbi, and I think you addressed this, is because we know what happened here is unspeakable, but we must speak of it, not just here, but everywhere we go. These camps are a terrible reminder of evil and what evil can and will do. They stand as a symbol of the long process of stripping entire communities of their dignity and their lives, and how they suffered in the lead up to their unspeakable deaths. In the book I'm reading, and I quote, he writes, "Nothing belongs to us anymore. They have taken away our clothes, our shoes, even our hair. If we speak, they will not listen to us. And if they listen, they will not understand. They will even take away our name." The names of those in the camps were replaced by numbers. These numbers were tattooed on their arms. They were called out by numbers. Their names were erased. For me, as a woman and as Vice President of the European Parliament, I especially cherish the story and memory of prisoner number 78651. Prisoner 78651 was Simone Veil, a French woman, lawyer, who served as Minister and President of the European Parliament. Simone Veil reminds us why Europe is important and why our work is a work in progress of trying to build a peaceful and united Europe. And we do that in memory of the very dark past and in not too distant past. I'm reminded by our guide who said that some come here without an understanding of history and reality and take selfies without knowing the horror behind this place. And I hope that each of us here today will go wherever we go and bring with us our stories and our memories and our pleading to make sure that humanity does not allow anything like this to happen ever again. So let me turn to the situation we face in Europe and in the world. 75 years after the liberation of this camp, cities have been rebuilt, villages rebuilt, but communities never fully repaired. Even today, healing remains a long, unfinished process, in many ways almost an impossible task. Auschwitz is about memory. It is also about consciousness in today's world. It is a constant reminder and a warning to us. Today, in many places around the world, inhumanities and injustices are inflicted on people. People are stripped of their nationalities, their clothes, their dignity. And as much as we need to confront history by preserving the memory of the Holocaust, we also need to confront the reality of what happens today, every day, the reality of hate speech. In Europe, the situation is worrying, especially for members of the Jewish community. The Fundamental Rights Agency has found that almost half of young Jews have been the victims of anti-Semitic harassment, some subject to physical attacks, even in schools and universities. And the tragedy is that many of these go unreported. This is why it is so important to speak and why we need to speak. The European Union needs to work internally and externally. The European Parliament has repeatedly called on member states to combat all forms of racism, including that which takes place online. In 2018, member states adopted a declaration on the fight against anti-Semitism and decided on a common approach to better protect Jewish communities in Europe. And my first visit to the synagogue in Brussels, I was so sad to see that the place of worship needed protection and armed protection and security. It is not how we should have our places of worship, and we hope for a better future. We know that there is no lasting peace without dialogue. There is no genuine dialogue in fear. In my work under Article 17 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, we have regular dialogue with religious and philosophical organizations. These regular debates and consultations are important to make sure that communities, including our Jewish communities, can voice their views and opinions on the European Union and our policies. I believe we need more space and more time for dialogue. In a world that moves ever swiftly, we need time to reflect and to respect and understand the awful past so that it does not ever reappear in future. I began by saying that my parents came here many years ago and found it really difficult to speak and to understand. And I understand better now myself how they felt. And I will talk to my brothers and sisters about this. Some experiences are extremely hard to transmit. But I know that when I go back, I will speak to my 4 children and husband about this place, what it means, and how important it is to come here and perhaps to be silent, to understand the awfulness of it. And I'm glad that we are here in numbers to remember and to stand together. I will also bring back to the European Parliament the sense of sadness that I feel here today. We will commemorate in the Parliament International Holocaust Remembrance Day next week at the opening of our plenary session. And I think it will have a more profound effect on me because of being here. And I thank you for allowing me to be with you so that I will bring that understanding. Primo Levi's words will most likely resonate in my mind during the minute of silence. If understanding is impossible, then knowing is imperative, because what happened could happen again. His words. He is one of the many silent witnesses who call us to responsibility, wherever we are, and we must answer that call. I want to finish by 2 other remarks. One of them to tell you and to hope you will see more about an initiative in the European Parliament's House of European History, which is gathering podcasts about those who survived. And there's one podcast called They Always Called Me by Number, Never by Name, a survivor's story. And these can be heard and visited in the House of Human History. And lastly, to Mr. Tommy Reichenthal, who lives in Ireland, my country. We are ever grateful for his gentle witness. He came to Ireland in 1959, the year of my birth. He didn't speak for many years about what he experienced in these awful camps. He's now 84 years of age. He was taken to Bergen-Belsen in 1944 and liberated the following year. He has spent the last decade visiting schools, promoting tolerance, educating young people about remembrance and reconciliation. And again, I feel and understand better his great work. Dear colleagues, distinguished visitors and guests, it is easy to forget, and that is the tragedy. But we cannot ever, ever forget. And while we are deeply moved at an emotional level, that is not enough. We do have to act. We have to light candles in sacred places, whatever your faith or whatever your philosophy. We have to understand tragically that human beings have done the worst to one another and may indeed be capable of doing so again. My colleagues in the European Parliament stand with you today and always, and I hope that through our work, which is slow and painstaking, of trying to build relationships and build the European Union as a community of values, that you will stay with us on this journey. Again, thank you. And it is unspeakable what happened here on this ground. It's a sacred place for the lives of those whose lives were lost. Thank you.
Vice President, we thank you for this beautiful speech. It is an honor to have you with us. And now we're going to call our guest speaker, which is a very big privilege for us that he's here today. He came all the way from Israel just for a few hours just to spend it with us. So first of all, I want to say that it is an honor for us. You are well loved and respected around the world. And we're going to call the former Chief Rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Israel Lau. Thank you. And can I also say, and I'm really sorry I forgot to say it, is also the chairman of the Council of Yad Vashem. Thank you. Such an honor.
Thank you. Honorees, Rabbanim, dear colleagues and friends, guests, thank you for coming. I am not the owner of this place. I don't live in Poland anymore. I was born here. But still, I thank you for your arrival. A few years ago, on the 1st of February, this place was covered with snow and heavy snow. I arrived on a plane from Paris, led by an organization called Aladdin. In Aladdin, the target was to make some understanding, friendship even, maybe peace between Jewish and Islamic world and leaders. I came here as a guest of this organization, Aladdin, sponsored by Baron Rothschild from Paris. And the second guest was the Chancellor of Deutschland, of Germany, Gerhard Schröder. And I spoke about my experience, born here in Piotrków Tribunalski, not very far from here. In the ghetto, I lost my father. And then I was with my brother and my mother. All of a sudden, they pushed us to the train station in Piotrków. We have to go. We have to move. The Red Army of the Soviet Union was close to Piotrków, so we have to escape from them and to continue the life of prisoners of war. Where to, we didn't know, but how fast we went. Schnell, schnell, schnell. I cannot forget the picture that my mother and me, 7.5 years that time, on one side, and my brother, 18 years old, on the other side. They had time, the German Nazis had time to make this selection, men and women, children and babies with the women, of course. My mother understood that the men had a better chance to survive. They are productive. They go to work in some factories that German needs. And the women with the babies, who need them? So maybe we go in the same train, the same locomotive, but not to the same destination. At the last second, it took more than seconds, she pushed me away and threw me away from her and called to my brother, Turek, take the jetsko, take the child. And he said, what shall I do with the child? But she was pushed to the train, such a wagon, no windows, pushed to the train, and the last moment that I can remember from my mother, she looked at us, she couldn't say a word, it was a noise, bullets, dogs, the train, she only made with the hand this moment, and this is what I do remember from my mother, the last second we have met. She died in Deutschland in Ravensbrück. My father perished earlier in Treblinka, here in Poland. And I was taken from Częstochowa, here in Poland, a labor camp, to the concentration camp in Deutschland called Buchenwald, where I was liberated on April 45. When I came here a few years ago on the 1st of February, I remember one word between all the others. When I told my story, a little bit more details, the Imam of Bosnia, I forgot his name, climbed up on the stage. He wasn't on the program, but he couldn't keep himself. And that time, the president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, denied Holocaust. Never happened. The Jews say a legend, it's a bluff. Today would we say fake news. It never happened. He couldn't stand by. When I finished my words, he climbed up and said, Ahmadinejad, the name of the Iranian president at the time. Mahmoudi Ahmadinejad, come here. You sit in Tehran, 4 hours flight, come to Auschwitz. Listen to Chief Rabbi Lau. Look at the barracks. Look at the crematoria. Look at the... How can you deny? See in your very eyes. Listen to the words, to the stories. Stupid of you. Come. Ahmadinejad didn't come, but you know how we appreciate your arrival in such a freezing day, to come, to see, to listen, and to identify. And the slogan was written here, not on my time, not on my watch, is not only words. It must be acted in the field of doing. What do I mean? Speaking about fighting anti-Semitism is very important, but you have to express it. Anti-Semitism is something you can explain, but you cannot find a reason for it. It's against dialogue. It's against logic. It's a spiritual madness.